Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. I wasn't actually planning on coming back to any of the Zoids sequels yet, but I've gotten a great response from reviewing the first season, so I figured, why not? It was on my to-do list. Reviewing Zoids has been a little like stepping into someone else's childhood, but I did enjoy the original, so I had some pretty high expectations going into the first sequel. Zoids New Century, sometimes called Zoids New Century Zero, though I'm not sure if that was just a regional name change or something, lives up to its name. The only thing it has in common with original Zoids is that it takes place in the same universe, but things have changed drastically in the last century. These days, Zoids are used exclusively for sport, in battles designed and presided over by a battle commission. We meet our new main protagonist when he accidentally gets caught in the middle of one of these battles. Well, perhaps accidentally isn't the best way to portray it. BitCloud is a scavenger. He lurks around Zoid battles to collect scrap parts from the losing team, but he didn't intend to get quite so close to this battle that the truck he's been living out of was all but destroyed. This is how he meets the Blitz Team, one of the worst teams in the league that's racked up quite a bit of debt. The Blitz Team is made up of their captain, Leon, Leon's trigger-happy sister, Lena, a mercenary named Brad, their strategist, Jamie, and the team manager, as well as Leon and Lena's father, Doc. So Bit spends the night with the Blitz Team. They've got another battle coming up, but most of their Zoids were nearly destroyed in their last one. In part because the Blitz Team stopped when they realized Bit was on the field, but no one else did, so in a few ways Bit is in debt to them already. The Blitz Team's only hope is the one Zoid they have left, a Liger Zero that no one has been able to pilot, so of course Bit is the only one who can get through to the Liger Zero. And while there was definitely a predictable, go figure, he's the main character feel to this, Bit and the Liger Zero do make a good pair, and it's believable that the Liger Zero would accept Bit and only Bit because he's the only one as stubborn and competitive as it is. So Bit registers as a warrior on the Blitz Team, giving Leon a chance to go see the world, and we have our story. It wasn't a bad start. Unfortunately, I immediately ran into a few problems, though even now I'm not sure if the characters or the story were the bigger shortcoming for me. After the first few episodes, my outlook on the characters quickly became, well, no wonder Leon took off the first opportunity he got. Nearly every member of this team is just so selfish and unlikable. Their leader is incompetent, constantly mishandling their money. Brad is a mercenary to a T. He doesn't do anything if there isn't some sort of compensation involved, and I mean anything. There's an episode where Lena gets kidnapped by a rogue team, like it was reasonable to think her life could be in danger, and Brad can't be bothered until Doc agrees to pay him for it. Though I almost can't blame him because Lena might just be the most unlikable of all. She's of a certain class of female characters where the writers probably intended them to be seen as tough and confident, but really she's just vain and easily angered. The first episode that really centers on Lena, she uses this focus to manipulate two boys into fighting over her. Yep, Lena is that character. If there is any slack I can cut her, it's that she does manage to rescue herself every time she's kidnapped. So she's not weak, just selfish and unlikable like most of the rest of her team. If there was anyone I could excuse for not working well with others, it's Bit, who's always been on his own. But even for Bit, it takes a long time to adapt to being part of a team, and it could be argued that he never really does. At the end of the first or second episode, there was actually a really interesting exchange between Bit and Leon, where Bit explains that he got into scavenging in the first place because he wanted to collect each individual part to build himself the perfect Zoid. Except now that he's met the Liger Zero, it may not be the perfect Zoid, but it could be the perfect Zoid for him. I feel like if they'd explored this a little more, it could have redeemed Bit some, but at the end of the day, I still got the impression that almost every member of the Blitz Team was looking out for number one first. The only one I kind of liked was Jamie. but that starts to tie into the story, so let's address that first. Competing in this Zoid Battle League was all there really was to the story for a while. Each episode introduced a new rival, some more likable than others. We start to get a feel for what the real story is going to be with the introduction of the Backdraft Group, a team that doesn't obey any of the Battle Commission's rules and confiscates any Zoids they defeat in battle, but even this development takes a long time to get underway. Interactions with Backdraft are still interspersed pretty evenly with battles against other regular teams. I would say the first really good episode doesn't come until episode 10. This is where Jamie comes back in, and we finally get a sense of Backdraft's goals. There have been no improvements in the Blitz Team's teamwork since day one, and Jamie can't understand how they've kept up their winning streak. He's their strategist, remember, but the Blitz warriors never really listen to him. There was a great scene in this episode where Jamie manipulates them into not working together exactly, but working effectively around each other. Like I said, their teamwork only sort of comes together by series end, but at this point I was just glad someone had addressed one of the obvious problems with this series, and Jamie uses this to adjust his strategies from here on out. Along the same lines, one of the Backdraft generals, and there are already almost more than I can keep track of at this point, sets his sights on the Liger Zero, thinking it might be the legendary Ultimate X Zoid he's been looking for. This is episode 10, out of 26. Backdraft starts making appearances more regularly from here on out, but the story doesn't really pick back up until episode 22. A lot happens between these 2 points, but not a lot of importance. The general, who was looking into the Liger, manages to excavate another Ultimate X Zoid, and when we finally get an explanation for what exactly an Ultimate X is, it answers a few other questions of mine. Back in original Zoids, all Zoids had some form of sentience. Every Zoid had a Zoid core, which was essentially what brought it to life, and if a Zoid's core was destroyed, the Zoid couldn't be fixed. This was important because it meant all Zoids required a connection with their pilot. That's not really the case anymore. Zoids in this season are talked about like they're just regular machines, and a Zoid's capabilities depend on the skill of the pilot. Bit seems to be the only one who can really communicate with his Zoid, and the Liger Zero has been shown to be able to make its own decisions if it doesn't agree with Bit. We learn that this is because the Liger Zero is an Ultimate X Zoid, meaning it has a built-in organoid system. In original Zoids, organoids existed to fuse with regular Zoids and enhance them. More importantly, there was no question of their sentience. Organoids were more like animals than machines, and though already uncommon in original Zoids, in the past century they've become a thing of legend. This was all really interesting, but unfortunately I couldn't help feeling like the story derailed a bit after this. Let's back up a bit. Episode 10 was the first really good episode in New Century, but episode 13 was probably the best it ever got. After Backdraft flat out kidnaps the Liger Zero and tries to force Bit to join them, since he's the only one who can pilot it, the Zoid Battle Commission finally takes a stand and gives the Blitz Team their full support in going after Backdraft, luring them into a trap. This was also an interesting episode for Jamie, if a little uncomfortable. Basically, Jamie doesn't have the confidence to pilot his new Zoid, but they send him into battle anyway, and he has an epiphany of sorts, in the form of, developing full-scale dissociative identity disorder. Seriously, he gets into trouble in the air, a separate brave warrior personality takes over, and when he wakes up, he has no memory of the event. Anyway, this was the series' opportunity to refocus on taking down Backdraft completely. But they don't take it, and we go back to every other episode being some lighthearted interaction with one of the other rivals. Even the ones that seem important, like Leon returning with a new Zoid, don't end up being of much consequence. Which isn't to say it was all shortcomings and problems. Their comedic timing got pretty good by the end. In both the Halloween-themed episode and the episode where Brad steals one of the Backdraft Zoids, they did a really good job with the lighting, too. Both episodes were genuinely eerie, which wasn't a tone the series was usually going for, so they stood out to me. And if there was one thing New Century had on the original, it was that the voice work was pretty good from day one, whereas everything in the original fell a little flat even on their best days. So New Century did have a few things going for it. But I can't help feeling like they didn't focus on the right things. The final conflict ends up being between Bit and a young boy named Vega, who Backdraft recruited to pilot their new Ultimate X. And don't get me wrong, all this about the Liger Zero being an Ultimate X, and that's why Bit has been so successful, because an organoid has an artificial intelligence that can learn from its mistakes even if its pilot doesn't, was really interesting, but in the end they didn't end up addressing a lot of the things I wanted to see. I wish they'd gone a lot deeper into Backdraft, what exactly it is and why it came together, because though they did some despicable, underhanded things, they don't always seem evil. Some of the other Backdraft warriors the Blitz team defeated told them that they didn't cheat just because they could. They felt bending certain rules made the battles more challenging and interesting, and despite this, Bit was able to convince some of them to quit Backdraft and fight honorably. But even more than this, we're shown that Backdraft survives on wealthy people betting on their battles, and you have to assume that many of these anonymous donors are well-known, respectable people in this world. And you also just have to know that they weren't apprehended for anything when Backdraft went down, so there's always the possibility someone could start it back up. All in all, I wasn't that impressed with New Century, and I think that had a lot to do with my expectations after the last season. We got to see the characters in original Zoids turn the tide of a war and then save the world. There's nothing really at stake here in comparison. The characters are a lot less likable, and they're battling just for the sake of battling, and prize money. I think the main difference is that I went into original Zoids expecting just another kids show trying to sell toys, and I got a really heartfelt story. Zoid battles are interesting and exciting because of what's at stake behind them. The characters grew as Zoid pilots and learned from their mistakes from each battle. So with New Century, I went in expecting a story that was different but equally good, and what I got was a show that felt like its primary goal was to sell toys. Bit never had to learn from his mistakes or grow as a character because he always won. Or if he lost, which does happen maybe once or twice in the entire series, those instances never meant anything. I'm not expecting nearly the same response from this review, because from what I've seen, New Century is still coasting pretty comfortably on what I can only guess is pure nostalgia. But if you're just looking to get into Zoids for the first time, I suggest starting with the original. Thank you for watching.